to tell you, sometimes this job sucks beyond belief. Other times, it is the coolest job in the world. Tonight, I was telling my niece, I said, tonight I get to go home and say to my wife, I spent an hour with Martin Luther King JR's niece, a rock legend and one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Joining me now, Dr. Alveda King, pastoral associate at Priests for Life. She is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, the daughter of King's brother, A.D. King, and music legend. This has never happened before. You keep your randy hands to yourself.
This is our first date, Glenn.
Music legend Ted Nugent. And then, joining us from Princeton University's McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence, Robert George. Wow. Wow. All right. So here's why I've collected you three. I've collected you because, Dr. King, you know history. You were there.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk about history. Martin Luther King had it nailed. I'm convinced he has the answer for today.
Absolutely.
Nuge, you're here because you're an outspoken guy, and you're also, I think a lot of people to me would go, he's a gun nut.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have noticed that. But you are also dedicated to peace, and sometimes
absolute
like,
nonviolence. Yeah. Absolute nonviolence and peace, and demonstrating we the people in the most peaceable way we can.
Right. And then I have Robert George, because Robert, you're a guy that consults with presidents and popes and is a big thinker, and I thought you could also help kind of stitch all of this together so we could help the American people. So,
well, thank you for inviting me onto the show, Glenn.
You bet. Let me start with Dr. King. Do you see parallels between the 1960s and today?
There are parallels between the 60s, Glenn, and now, because during the 1960s, people were being slaughtered, their lives were being taken, there was violence, greed, drugs were rising, just all of this. And my uncle was saying, you've got to come back to faith, hope, and love. Now, you get the Bible translation say faith, hope, and charity, faith, hope, and love. And he got that from his father, Daddy King. And he got that from his ancestors, you know. And so coming forth, you've got to love each other. You have to have faith. And you never lose hope, even when things are really, really, really bad. There's always hope. So today, we have the same conditions. People are being slaughtered, war and rumors of war, abortion, drugs, sicknesses, disease, all of this is going on. Greed. America is just going crazy with greed. I really have to say that. And so in the midst of all of this, people caring more about themselves than the least of these, than others. And so the answer is going to always be the same. You've got to have faith. You've got to begin to continue to hope and not give up on others. And then the other thing, you hate evil, but you don't hate the people that do evil. So hate has to go out the window.
Let me go to you, Ted, because that's where I think people confuse the truth with hate. I don't have, if I met President Obama, he's the president of the United States, and he's a human being that I greatly disagree with, but I don't hate the man.
So, well, it's pretty simple. I'm honored to be here with Dr. King, and I think it's best to just quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if I can get it accurate. Those of us who engage in nonviolent direct action are not responsible for the tension. We're merely bringing to the surface a tension that already exists. That's the experiment in self-government, where corruption metastasizes if not monitored by the boss, we the people. The boss is coming in and saying, you guys are out of control. We want accountability. We want you to conduct yourself in a responsible manner the way our families do. And that's where you're going to get peace and love. That's where you're going to get hope and faith in a government that represents you accurately. So as there's tension, we are not the cause of tension. We are the monitors of tension, and we want it reduced through peaceful assembly.
So, Professor George, Martin Luther King, if I'm not mistaken, said that he actually didn't mind tension. He
well,
said,
tension is necessary, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, but everybody else is trying to You have Bill Clinton saying, you can't speak out. You can't say these things. You have a responsibility. So in other words, if any nut job goes and grabs a gun, then I'm responsible.
You have an obligation to speak out.
I have a duty.
The question comes back, am I my brother's keeper? Well, of course you're your brother's keeper. And if you see your brother about to be harmed and somebody's doing something, you must speak out. It takes courage to do that. And then you have to come out of yourself to do that. A selfish person says, hey, me and my four at home and no more, and whatever happens to you is okay, but it can't be that way. It cannot be that way.
Professor George, let me go, if we can bring it up on the screen, the line from the Manhattan Doctrine. Can you explain what the Manhattan Doctrine is?
It's the Manhattan Declaration, Glenn, and that's a declaration that was put together by leading Catholic, Evangelical, Protestant, and Eastern Orthodox Christians, pledging themselves to three great foundational principles of our civilization. One is the sanctity of human life in all stages and conditions. Okay. The dignity of marriage as the conjugal union of husband and wife is the second. And the need for respect for religious liberty and the rights of conscience is the third. And it began with about 100 leading religious figures, and it has now spread. It's on the internet at www.manhattandeclaration.org.
You're part of this too,
I actually signed the document. I'm definitely.
Alveda signed, and she's one of 400, roughly 450,000 American citizens, ordinary folks from all walks of life who've joined the great religious leaders in signing on.
The reason why I bring this up, pull the full screen up, please, about Caesar. This is, I believe, your line, Professor, and I think this is unbelievable. We are fully and ungrudgingly render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but under no circumstance will we render to Caesar what is God's.
Bingo.
Yeah.
That is one of the, is that your line, Professor?
Well, of course, I'm drawing it from the scripture. Jesus said that when confronted with Caesar's coin, to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, but unto God what is God's. This was echoed by Martin Luther King, Alveda's uncle, who had great respect for law and for the rule of law, but said there comes a point at which a law can be so unjust that it's necessary openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the consequences, to refuse to comply with a gravely unjust law.
Civil disobedience, the core of American defiance against kings and emperors.
So what is the difference between, because for a lot of people, me included, abortion is murder. And it just becomes clearer and clearer the closer you get to birth. I mean, it's just so, I think if you had a womb with a window, it would never happen.
Absolutely. My uncle said that America will not reject racism until America sees racism. So then you saw the guns and the dogs and the billy clubs. Today, over at Priest for Life, Father Frank Pavone says America won't reject abortion until America sees abortion. And, we're going to be getting on a bus in a few weeks to do that, pro-life freedom rides. And so what you've got, if you're slaughtering people because of skin color or gestational age, it's still wrong. It's just wrong.
Okay, so now I want to go, when we come back, I've got to ask you about, that's such a clear-cut case, but what about the Tea Parties and what's going on? We'll get there next.
The Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama will return to the buses on a non-segregated basis.
I had a lady call me on my radio show today, and it's a phone call I don't think I'll ever forget. She was very passionate. God love her. She was so passionate, and she said, Glenn, tell us the way out. I can't figure it out. Tell us the way out. And I said, I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing the best I can. And quite honestly, if I can get all Jesus with you here for a second, I feel God's a little cryptic at times. He's like, figure it out, dummy. Faith, hope, and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. Those are the tools he gave me, and I keep circling around it. But I'm telling you, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to lay something out. History is the answer. I'm going to lay something out that I found today that we happen to have the perfect person to explain it to you. I'm with Dr. Alveda King. She is the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., music legend Ted Nugent, gun lover, and Princeton University's Robert George. Professor, let me start with you. We know, like we were talking a minute ago, about abortion, and people either feel, if you think about it, you generally go one way or the other, and you're strong in that view. But that one's pretty easy for people. The media keeps looking at these Tea Party